and welcome to my YouTube channel. My name is Tafadzwa. Today I'm going to be talking about Flowers in the Attic, the 1987 movie, the 2014 movie, and the book all together. So this is an all-encompassing review. There will be spoilers for absolutely everything, so if you don't want to be spoiled, then leave the video and come back later. I'm going to talk about the plot to begin with, the summary. So basically there's a basic plot that runs through both movies and the book, but there are some slight changes. So basically there's a family of 5 and everything is perfect. They're super happy. They're very beautiful. That's very much emphasized. They're blonde hair and blue-eyed. They have long, glorious hair. Everyone thinks they're beautiful.
Because the neighbors think we look so perfect.
We are perfect.
Like the neighbors are jealous of them. They're painted as this all-American beautiful family. But they have a secret. So basically the dad passes away and they're left with very little money left because they didn't have a lot of savings. In fact, they had no savings. They don't have a lot of money. She can't support 4 kids on her own. And she's just like, I don't know what to do. So she calls her family, who the kids didn't know she even had family left or that they talked to their family or anything of the sort. And she says, can I come move back in with you? So basically the secret that they had is that her husband was actually her half-uncle. So she was disinherited, exiled, thrown out the family because of this. Well, both of them were because they came from the same family. But despite that, it turns out that her family is actually very rich.
Not middle class rich, but unbelievably wealthy.
So she's like, listen up, I'm going to move back in with them. I'm going to win my father back over, get him to love me again, get him to write me back in his will, and then we're going to be fine. The only issue is that her father doesn't know that she has kids, and she doesn't want to tell him yet because he doesn't want her to have kids. So he was like, you can move back in, provided that you don't have any kids with this guy, because that would be incest of the 11th degree. That would be disgusting. Move back in, but you have no kids, so move back in by yourself because you don't have any kids. So she moves back in and tells him that she doesn't have any kids, but she has kids. And they move in as well, but they hide up in an attic, hence Flowers in the Attic. So the only person who knows about them is her mom, who is abusive, who's toxic, she's horrible. So she knows that she has kids and she hides them up in the attic and brings them food. So their mom comes to visit them and that's basically what happens. So that's like the beginning. Then they're meant to stay up there for a couple of days or a week. So she's meant to go in there, apologize to her dad, win him over, and he's meant to love her and be like, okay, cool, what's up? She's going to tell him that she has kids. He's going to accept it and then all the kids will come down from the attic. Everything will work out perfectly. It does not work out like that, of course. Basically what happens is she never tells him. She never tells him that she has kids. So at first they're waiting for him to die or for her to win him over. So first she's like, listen up, he has heart disease, he's old, he's gonna kick the bucket eventually, just hold on until he dies. He has maybe a month left, he does not have that long left. So they're waiting and waiting and this nigga lives forever. So they're there for years. Then what happens is the little brother dies, the little twin brother dies. And they discover they're getting not all the food.
Are these donuts?
They're from your mother.
And in the 1987 version, it's cookie. So because of this, they're like, we have to escape, we have to move out. So they make all these plans to escape. They manage to copy the key. So basically what happens is, in the 2014 movie, the son, like the older brother Christopher, gets on his knees and he presses the key from the grandmother's waist into a bar of soap while he's at her knees. He's making a big show of it. He's like, grandmother, blah, 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 and he's busy pressing in this key. And she doesn't notice. And then he takes the bar of soap and makes a key based on the imprint. So the book makes a lot more sense. What happens is the mom is a bit like careless. So she leaves the key lying around and they take the key while she's speaking. They put it into a bar of soap and then they put it back before she leaves. Makes a lot more sense. But, you know, like just it fit in dramatically with the movie and what was happening. And it made for a better performance. So they manage to escape and they break out. So basically they start stealing from the house. So they do a bit of stealing occasionally, they steal, then they manage to break out the house and they leave. And they take a train and they go somewhere else. And that's the end of the movie. However, in the 1987 version, they twist it around. And I even saw a comment saying, yeah, the mom gets what she deserves. So this was before I watched the movie, so seeing that I was like, well, I wonder what happened, so I watched the movie. And basically what happens is they take the cookie that they know poisoned the little boy and they show up, they leave the house and there's a wedding. So she's getting married to her dad's lawyer. So they show up at the wedding where her mom's getting married again and they go, listen up, you tried to kill us. And she's like, I have no idea who these kids are. And they're like, we're your kids, and if you didn't poison this cookie, eat it, eat the cookie. So she pushes this cookie in her mom's face, and her mom knows it's poison, so she's like, nah, bruh, I'm good. And they push up against a balcony. She falls over, and her veil catches on something. Like, I can't explain it. It catches on something, and she's hanged. So the mom dies at the end of the movie. And there was never a sequel because it kind of, firstly, there were like production difficulties and, you know, all that kind of stuff. It kind of crossed off the ability to have a sequel because the sequel centers around the mom being alive and revenge. But I won't get into that right now. So now that I have the basic plot, I'm going to talk about the characters. So first of all, we have the dad, Christopher. And he is like a model dad. He's amazing. He's involved in their lives, but he's also a very hard worker. So he often goes on business trips for a couple of days at a time, comes home for the weekend with gifts. So gifts are like a big thing in this movie, like in terms of like materialism, consumerism. And we see this glorification of gifts. So he always comes home with beautiful gifts for them. And actually after his death, they take a gift back to the house. Kathy takes a special gift back to the house. And to punish her, because the grandmother hates their father. She hates their father because of what he did to her daughter. Although she hates her daughter as well, I'll get into that later. In the 2014 version, it's a ring. So she takes the ring away from Kathy and says, I'm going to keep this because I hate your father and I hate you too. And in the 1987 version, it's a beautiful music box. And the grandmother knocks it off of the mantle and it falls to the floor and breaks. And it's just this heartbreaking moment where you're like, oh. So he always brings gifts home, and the mom is super, like, because she grew up super rich, she's used to this lifestyle. So she gets these gifts, she's like, oh, they're so beautiful, you know, and all this money that they spend obviously is why they have no savings when he dies, why he has no insurance, why he has no life policy, because they spend all their money on these little gifts and just kind of, I don't know what it is, but it's kind of a way to show love. Like, their love language is gift giving. That's the dad. So otherwise he's a really great dad. He participates with his children. He is painted as having absolutely no flaws whatsoever. He's seen as this perfect character, especially in the movies where we don't get to know him very well. Like, we see one scene with him, establishes that he's a very good dad, that he's empathetic, he's considerate, he loves his kids, he talks to his children, they worship him, then he dies. Whereas the book goes into a bit more about it, but he has no flaws. Then we have the mother. The mother is Corinne. And basically she is materialistic. She's used to this particular lifestyle and she values that above all else. So you can see that she sacrifices her children for her new lifestyle, for living luxuriously, for this kind of way of life. And she sees the kids less and less as time goes by because she prioritizes hanging out with their friends and seeing her dad and just getting money, because to her that's what matters the most. And what we actually find out at the very end, so they've been waiting for their grandfather to die. So first they're like, I'll introduce you to my grandfather. Then she changes it to, listen up, wait until he dies, then I'll take you out the attic. What happens is he dies and she never tells them. She leaves them in the attic. And that's because she's living this lifestyle without her kids. She gets remarried to the father's lawyer. She's living, this is 2014 version by the way, and in the book, she's living her best life and she doesn't want them to interrupt that. And she's rich. She's finally rich and she's living her life. And when it comes to saving her children or getting them out the attic, she goes, it's fine, I can deal with that later. And that's where the poisoning comes in. So we can see that, like, in terms of her priorities and what matters to her, family doesn't matter to her, money matters to her the most. And she even says in the book, money makes the world go round, not love. Then we have Christopher. So Christopher wants to be a doctor, so he's very much a know-it-all. And there's a slight age difference between Kathy and Christopher that means the entire world, because he knows about sex, he knows about sexuality, he knows seemingly everything to Kathy. And he spends the entire novel talking about things that she doesn't understand in terms of sex and just life. Then we have Kathy. So Kathy is the narrator of the book. So in the book, she's writing it. In the movie, she's just the voiceover narrator talking about the past and reflecting on what happened. And she's absolutely amazing. She's very resilient. She's very strong. She is quite young in the book. And what the thing is, I'll get into that a little bit later, she's quite young, so she doesn't know much about the world. She's a bit wet behind the ears. And she's this wonderful character that you kind of learn to, like, love because you're invested in her, you want the best for her. Then we have the two twins, so we have Carrie and Corey. Carrie talks a lot. She has more of a personality in the book, obviously, than in the movies. She's just seen as a sprat. So she does talk a lot, she whines a lot, she screams a lot, she's very loud. And then Corey is very quiet. He's a natural musician. He plays the banjo and the guitar, and he's very quiet, but he's very much loved. He's very endearing, and that's what we happen. So that's with the characters. Then we have the grandmother. The grandmother's absolutely, like, She had a very tough childhood, and the thing is, you have a lot more sympathy for her when you read the book, because there are all these like little stories in terms of like child rearing. So for example, this will also go into the issue of sexuality, but there's a story of glass cube, and inside there's this dollhouse, this expensive, fancy, it's basically a work of art, and in real life it's not the kind of dollhouse that you play with. So the grandmother grew up with the dollhouse, and she was never allowed to play with it, she just had to look at it. And imagine being a child and given a gift like this, where you don't even play with it, you just look at it. And it's kind of like, that's the kind of lifestyle she had, that's the kind of childhood she had. It wasn't a real childhood, you know? She was a child to be seen and not heard. She didn't actually get to live life. So when she grows up and passes the dollhouse down, her husband breaks open the glass and he goes, listen up, Corin, you can play with this. My daughter, you can play with this dollhouse. But you have to promise me that you're not going to break anything. Like, promise on the Bible, promise, swear, oath. You're not going to break anything because it's expensive and it's art. You know, like there's a library, and in the books, if you have a magnifying glass, you can read the books. That's how fancy this dollhouse is. So she goes, okay, I promise I won't break anything. And then she breaks something and she gets whipped for it. And she's whipped for two reasons. One, because she broke something, and two, because she broke it taking off the jacket of the little male character. And she was whipped for trying to see what was underneath his clothes. Like, you know, this kind of exploration of like nudity and clothing and experience. That's a big issue in the book. So on to like sexuality. So sexuality is seen as it's evil. It's just seen as this like demonic kind of God-given curse. So Corin, the mom, is very sexy, and her mom hates that about her. She thinks, oh, this woman is very promiscuous, or even just her existence is very much, it's too enticing. It's quite slutty in nature, just her existence. I hate it. And the grandfather has all these outdated beliefs about sex. Well, I don't know if they're outdated at the time. Old-fashioned, and he seems to see sex and the opposite sex as horrible and sinful, as full of temptation. And we kind of see as Chris goes older, he knows about sex, and Kathy starts going through puberty. Especially in the books, this is very much explored. She's going through puberty, she has no idea what's happening. She's lost and she's confused about her feelings. She doesn't know what she's feeling. Chris knows what she's feeling. Chris feels the same things. And he has to repress his sexual desire because there's no outlet for it. He can't talk to other guys, he can't go out with a girl, he can't kiss another girl, he can't express his sexual desire. So he's repressing it, and you can see that he's suffering inside, and he's so lonely. He's lonely, he doesn't know, because this is like such a unique situation. Like, it's not like he can read a book about other kids who are stuck up in an attic, or there's no one he can relate to. There's no famous novel like, well, now there's a famous novel like that. But he can read Shakespeare and stuff like that, but he can never relate to that feeling of suffocation, of suppression, of frustration, that sexual frustration. So that's a big thing. So it kind of had this idea of what child abuse is. So them being locked up in the attic isn't initially seen as abusive, but just the existence of keeping a child locked up, I think, is quite abusive. Like keeping them locked up in a small room where they all share a room, although of course they move up in the attic was massive. It just becomes increasingly harsh, and the grandmother becomes increasingly abusive. She actually whips the children because she sees them doing something. I know in the movie, she catches Chris and Kathy in the bathroom, and Kathy's wearing a bra. So what actually happened is Kathy was trying on the bra, looking at herself, and Chris walked in, and he was starstruck because the repressed sexuality and all that kind of stuff. She walked in and was like, what were you guys doing? Because she believes that the children are demonic and spawn of Satan, and that they're sickly because their parents were related, and because of the result of incest. She sees them doing the same mistakes, making the same mistakes, and also becoming incestuous, which actually happens. They do find this kind of attraction to each other, like this intense attraction, and they do end up hooking up. So what happens in the movie is that they have this moment, and then they kiss and they have sex, this kind of like intimate moment where they like, listen up, I care about you, and I know it was wrong, but I don't care. I want to be with you, even though it's not proper and it's not correct. In the book, however, Chris rapes her because they're busy exploring the house, and she finds her stepdad and she kisses him. So that's a little bit of like sexual assault there. He's sleeping, she comes and she kisses him, and he kind of sees her, but she doesn't know. So she goes back to the room, and Chris finds out because Chris is around the house, and he overhears his stepdad telling his mom the story. So he thinks it's a dream. So he's like, this little blonde girl who looked just like you came and kissed me. It was so marvelous. And the mom is like, a little blonde girl that looks like me came and kissed you in your dreams? what a weird dream. And Chris hears this, and we kind of see like the book delves into a lot more about sexuality, because in the movie he hears this, he comes back and he gets upset with her, right? In the book, he comes back and he goes, listen up, you're mine, you're mine, you're mine. Then he rapes her. And it's kind of like, he goes, listen up. And then in the book, he goes, I'm so sorry. I've wanted to do this for a long time, but whenever I get the urge to, I go read a book or I do something else or I eat or whatever. But I've been wanting to rape you this whole time. And I was like, damn, son. And then she goes, listen up, I wanted it, it's okay. Because if I wanted you to stop, I would have kneed you in the, like, I would have kneed you in the groin. Like, I know what to do. You told me if someone tries to get with me, straight up, and I didn't do that because I wanted it to happen too. Which is a nice bit of victim blaming. I feel very torn about it, because I feel like she was frustrated as well. And they also have all these other sexual moments, like moments that aren't shown in the movie because they're a bit explicit. Like, they're busy lying together and she's shirtless, I think, and he touches her nipple. Like, he plays with her nipple a little bit and she's like, whoa, what a jolt. And she doesn't know what that feeling is because it's new to her, it's foreign to her, and she's still quite young and exploring her sexuality, whereas Chris knows what's happening. She really doesn't know what's happening. And there's also religion. So in the book, religion comes out a lot more. It's very intense. So the mom talks about how her dad was quite religious and he donated a lot of money to the church, and then he could come home and be horrible and abuse her all he liked because he felt like he was a holy man. So in the book, the grandmother says you have to say your prayers before you go to bed, learn the Bible every single day, read to the kids the Bible if you can read, because I know you guys are like these demonic spawn and you're like backwards and foolish and not very clever because, you know, like product of incest. And she says learn Bible verses, and the kids actually, there's a comment made about how they go, it's fun learning Bible verses. They find verses that twist words or that suit their own agenda. So they used to make fun and like quote the most awkward verses or the most unfair verses, the most backwards verses. And then she was like, okay, Google, I know you can memorize the Bible, I'm done with those. And you kind of see the reason that they're hated so much is because incest is ungodly and sinful, and it plays a very, very big role in the book and their beliefs, and they're the spawn of Satan, they're the spawn of the devil. And they made to feel like, oh, we're the devil's kids, like our parents were the devil, we have no touch, we're not in touch with God, we're just these sinful beings who need to beg for forgiveness for being born, like we're sorry that we were born.
We are the devil's spawn. When someone wants to do wrong, it's never God who's tempting them. For God never wants to do wrong. Temptation is the pool of man's own evil thoughts and wishes.
Like watching the movie, just the way Kathy looks at her dad, in my opinion, is like, it's not even just the normal, like, I love my dad, but it almost seems like she's in love with him. Like, she looks at him and she's like, this is the kind of man I want to be with. This is the kind of man I want. And it's very much intense. And even the way in the book, the way Christopher looks at his mom and values her and the way they interact, it seems very much like he's in love with her. He wants to find a woman who's just like her. And it seems a little bit Freudian in nature, to me anyway, how much he loves his mom. She can do no wrong in his eyes. She's absolutely perfect to him. And we kind of see that come out in terms of she does wrong and wrong and wrong again and again and again, and he forgives her. Meanwhile, Kathy's like, nah fam, this is not Gucci. So that's basically, and in terms of like the framing of the movie, I really liked how the 2014 movie was filmed. We see these little bits in terms of like the way the windows are barred. So like in South Africa, all of our windows are barred for safety reasons, but I know a friend points out in Harry Potter, they put bars in his window to keep him, like, to trap him inside. And, you know, he complains and he feels trapped, and it's like, for us, bars are the norm. Their bars aren't the norm. So there are bars in the window, and they make Kathy look like she's in a prison when she looks out the window. And all the open little squares kind of look like all the people that are missing in her life, from her mom and her dad, the twins, and it's just her and Christopher in this little frame. And in terms of the foreshadowing, so basically what happens is there's a difference between the book and the movie. So in the movie, because they die, so Corey dies from the donut, right, in the 2014 movie. So they think it's the grandmother, and they're like, you tried to kill us. And the grandmother goes, no, it wasn't me, it was your mom. And basically on their last expedition to go and steal stuff to escape, they find out that their mom has moved out the house completely. So their mom left them in the attic and moved out the house with her new husband and left them behind. So that's when they're like, okay, we have to get out of here, like, get out of here immediately. And also we're horrified. And that's when they're horrified. So in the book, what happens is they leave and they discover that in the will, the grandfather wrote that if they've ever found out that she had kids from her past marriage, or if she had ever had kids from her subsequent marriages or her future marriages, she'll be disinherited and forced to pay back all the money. So she basically go bankrupt in a way that she can't even imagine. So that gives her more motivation to kill her own kids, because she'll lose all her money if they're discovered to be her kids. So that's a huge thing that comes out. And the thing is, the book had even more, made so much more sense in terms of the lifestyle that they lived. So in the beginning, the mom was going to typing classes to become a secretary. And she was like, listen up, what I'm going to do is go to typing classes, become a secretary. I'll buy a house down the corner or whatever, and I'll move you guys into it. And I'll stay by my dad so I can win his back his love. I'll be back in the world, but you guys won't be in an attic. And then she finally just kind of gives up on those classes. And she has all this money and her jewelry and all around her. And she could use that money to send them to a boarding school even, just send them away so they're not in the attic. But no, she keeps them trapped in there this whole time, and you have to keep wondering why. And what I loved about the foreshadowing, so they go watch a party, so they're hiding in a little cabinet, and they're like, we'll be quiet as mice. And it's interesting because, rat poison was put on the donuts, and the servants think that they're mice upstairs. So the servants hear their footsteps, even though they're being quiet. The servants hear them, and the servants think that they're actually just mice. And then the servants think that the grandmother who goes up there with food is taking rat poison up there to kill all the mice and the rats and everything. And Corey actually has a pet mice who sacrifices himself to prove that the donut or the cookie is poisonous, because they give him some more and he dies. And they're like, okay, cool. So clearly it's this food that killed our brother because it killed a mouse. And this mouse is used in an experiment, the same way mice often are, or rats often are. And basically, I just want to say that I loved the movie. The 2014 movie was amazing. The 1987 movie was horrible. I don't think I would have finished watching it if I hadn't seen my version first, the 2014 version. I was watching it, waiting for the incest. There was no incest. So they had cleaned it up heavily. So it was very much like a sanitized version of the original movie and of the book, which I hated. 2014 movie was a bit better, but I'd love to see a true adaptation with the rape, with the story, with the actual plot twist of, listen up, if she has kids, she'll lose everything. So that explains why the mom tried to poison them. I like that extra element, and I wish they could film a movie with all of that in it. Otherwise, I'd recommend the 2014 version. I love it to pieces. I'd recommend the book, but it's so long and so flowery. A lot of the time I'd reading it and I could skip through paragraphs, because I could read the middle of the paragraph and I'd be like, okay, she's describing something. Skip. But there's so much nuance and flesh to it in terms of how they grow the characters that I absolutely think the book is worth reading, especially when accompanied by the movie. And yeah, thanks for coming to my review.